Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Secretary, let me just get this straight. It's in response to Mr. Gibbs and Mr. Schuster, you are now going to respond to question 2 in our letter of April 21st, which is those projects that went into the appendix. You are now going to evaluate each of those projects under the 5 criteria and only the 5 criteria submitted by Congress and provide that back to us. Is that correct? Is that what you just said?
What I just said was that the Congressman Gibbs asked for a list of those projects that were in the appendix.
Yeah, well, we have that because that's easy. We can look at the appendix. That's what you referred me to in response to the letter. What we asked for was you take each one of those projects and apply yes or no to the 5 criteria enumerated in the statute. Is that my understanding? We're going to get that?
We will do that. Yes, we will.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Okay, now I don't want to get anyone on the spot, although since General Peabody is retiring in 2 weeks, congratulations, sir. You could answer the Mike Parker question. Now, some might remember Mike Parker, and I asked Mike in a hearing here, I said, is this budget adequate to meet the critical needs of the nation's infrastructure as relates to the Corps' mission? And Mike said no. A week later, he resigned for family reasons. Anybody want to answer the question today? General?
Well, sir, I'll tell you that I've been personally counseled by Mr. Parker to avoid his example. So in my personal judgment, it's clear that this nation has lost sight of, as a nation, and I don't think this is exclusive to any particular branch of the government or any echelon of the government, but the nation has lost sight of the importance and the reliance of our infrastructure to the health of our economy and of the natural resources that infrastructure helps preserve and maintain. We're partly, I think, victims of our success. As General Bostic said earlier, we built out this great infrastructure, and at one point in the middle to latter part of the last century, we were clearly the envy of the world. I don't think that is necessarily the case in all circumstances. So I think one of our biggest challenges is really to understand the inherent value of that infrastructure and the alternative histories that did not happen because that infrastructure exists. And the clearest example in my own mind is the great flood of the 2011 Mississippi River flood, which is the greatest flood in the recorded history of that river. And yet, in contrast to the 1927 flood, it was not a catastrophe. In that flood alone, well over $230 billion of damages were prevented as a result of the expansive Mississippi River and tributaries project. But because the catastrophe did not occur, it's very difficult for our citizenry to understand the impact and the value of this infrastructure. So to me, it's really one of understanding the value and then making investment choices on how to fund that. In my personal opinion, we don't have to do that from the Federal Government. That's why I think it's very important that we continue to work with the Congress on some of the alternative financing provisions that you've included in this WRRDA, which I think are a good first step, but I also think need to be further developed and expanded upon. It's something that we need to pursue. So I think how we fund it is the critical question for the nation to continue to contend with.
Well, thank you, General. That's the best response I've ever gotten to that question, and I agree wholeheartedly with it, and you did it very diplomatically. So thank you. Quick question about the 10% set-aside. Seems to be some confusion. Some of my ports have heard that someone in the bowels of OMB has interpreted the 10% to be a cap and not a floor. Secretary Darcy, can you tell me whether it's a cap or a floor?
I see it as a guideline as to what should be in the bill.
That's kind of evading the question. So it's not a cap?
It's not a cap.
Okay. That's the best I can do, probably. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Crawford.